We just need to add 2 dogs and then we would be the total package. Good. I have a PowerPoint here. If that works, you can... Oh, there it is. Beautiful. Thank you. This morning I want to look at a psalm, Psalm 63, and 1 to 8. And I came upon this psalm a couple months ago, and I've been sort of sitting with it for a while, and it's been speaking to me. And one of the good things about preaching, if some of you in here have experienced preaching, you know that before you preach to someone else, you have to preach that sermon to yourself. And for me, it's been really good to hear this sermon. And so God has been speaking to me through this, and I want to share some of my thoughts, how he's been speaking to me, and I think they will speak to you as well. So if this works, what do I point it at? That? Point back here? Back there? All right, you can just advance it manually. There's only a number of slides and it'll be fine. Just leave it there. That's good. So I want to read this psalm. Let's start by reading this. O God, you are my God. Earnestly I seek you. My soul thirsts for you. My flesh faints for you, as in a dry and weary land where there is no water. So I have looked upon you in the sanctuary, beholding your power and glory. Because your steadfast love is better than life, my lips will praise you. So I will bless you as long as I live. In your name I will lift up my hands. My soul will be satisfied as with fat and rich food, and my mouth will praise you with joyful lips. When I remember you upon my bed and meditate on you in the watches of the night, for you have been my help, and in the shadow of your wings I will sing for joy. My soul clings to you, your right hand upholds me. So the subheading of this psalm, if you've noticed in your Bible, says it's a psalm of David when he was in the wilderness of Judah. You can put that next slide up. Some of you will notice this looks familiar landscape to you. This is the wilderness of Judah. This is basically the southern half of Israel, and about 99% of it looks just like this. A dry and barren desert where there's not only no trees, but there is almost no vegetation, almost no water. In summertime, it'll hit 50 degrees, no problem. This is a hot, dry, weary place. And David describes this, my soul thirsts for you, my flesh faints for you, as in a dry and weary land where there's no water. We don't really know thirst. Most of us here don't know what it's like to be thirsty. We are the most well-hydrated people probably that have ever existed. Every road trip that we go on as a family, doesn't matter where we go, everybody's got a water bottle because that's just what you do nowadays. Everyone brings water. We've always got something to drink. Most of us here have probably never gone 24 hours without drinking something, let alone 12 hours. So imagine being in a place like this and going a couple of days with no water. 50 degrees, no shade, and David is thirsty. And this is the serious kind of thirst, of dehydration, where your head aches and your eyes are blurry and your head is spinning and you can think about nothing but water because you're in this dry, parched land. And David says, God, that's how I feel about you. That's how much I want you. That's how much I need you. I haven't often longed for God that way. We generally don't feel that sort of intense, burning longing for God. David is in a case of extreme distress. This might even have been a time when Saul was chasing him down, trying to murder him, and he is in a really hard spot. And he says, God, I need you. I need you like I need water in this place. So what do we do with a line like that? Do we preach it and say, look how much David wants God, you should want God that much too? I don't think so. I don't think we can't command each other to desire God like that. We can't create a longing. But what we do have in this psalm is a model for how to deal with hard situations, how to deal with times of transition like you are in and like our family is in. When we're in a tough time, What do we do? How do we remain faithful? And these 8 verses actually unpack something for us about how to remain faithful in hard times. And David, he's a man after God's own heart, right? He knows God well. He's been walking with God for a long time, just like lots of us. And he does this wonderful thing where he floats between past, present, and future to draw God's faithfulness and his faithfulness together. And so this is what I want to do as we go through this psalm this morning. So if we look at this psalm again, and just go to the first one, we start off, one more slide, go one back. There we go. Oh, maybe I messed up. Just go to the next one. The first one is red, is present tense. This is how things are. Right now, God, I'm in a dry and weary land, and I need you. Things are going poorly. My life is not going well. I really need you, God. So he starts off in that present situation. And we're going to follow sort of David's line of reasoning as he goes through the psalm. The first thing he does is go to the past. So verse 2 is going to be in green when we look at that, and that shows past tense. So he starts off looking at the past, and he says, I've looked upon you in the sanctuary, beholding your power and your glory. So he's remembering. He's remembering meeting God in the sanctuary. This is before the temple is built, right? This is the tabernacle. And he remembers being in God's presence. So remember, the Holy of Holies was in the middle of the sanctuary. I think you would have felt something being close to that God's presence was in that place. And he looks back and he remembers seeing God's power and his glory. And for us, we have memories of God's presence as well. Different for all of us, but we can look back and we can remember times where we can say, yeah, you know what, God, I felt you in that moment. Maybe it was 20 minutes ago when we were singing this morning, and you felt like God was present. Maybe it was a time when you went through a hard time, through sickness or illness, and you look back and you say, boy, God, I could feel your presence in that time. Maybe it's driving a tractor and just going down the field and praying and just having a sense that God is with you in that tractor. Maybe it's watching the thunderstorm or the blizzard or whatever it is and just feeling God's presence. We all have those times in our life that we can look back on and we can say, I remember that time when I felt your presence, when I was beholding your power and your glory. And David does that as well. And because of what's in his past, he looks to the future. And so the future now shows up in blue. And he says, because your steadfast love is better than life, my lips will praise you. I will bless you as long as I live. In your name I will lift up my hands. My soul will be satisfied as with fat and rich food, and my mouth will praise you with joyful lips. His memory of the past impacts his future. We don't talk in language like this anymore, but this is basically David's way of saying, I remember you, God. I remember how you've showed up. I remember being in your presence, so I'm going to be faithful to you in the future. I'm going to stay with you no matter what. And remember, the present situation that David is in a bad spot. His life is not going well. Sometimes God gives us a blessing, and we can say all these things. Oh, God, you're amazing. I'm going to bless you forever. You're so good to me because this good thing just happened. But David is in a bad spot. Bad things are happening to him, but he remembers the past, how he was in God's presence, and he says, because of that past, I will be faithful to you in the future. And then he goes back to the past, back to the green, and he says, when I remember you upon my bed and meditate on you in the watches of the night, for you have been my help. So here's David in the middle of the night at 3 a.m. Those of you who have infants, you're well aware of what it's like to be awake at 3 in the morning. And here's David, maybe he's doing the night watch or whatever with his group of people, and he's got the 3 a.m. to 4 a.m. shift. And he's there all alone. He doesn't have a cell phone. He doesn't have a book. He doesn't have anything but just the stars above him. And in that time, in the middle of the night, he's thinking back on how God has helped him. He remembers his time as a shepherd. He remembers being out there with his flock of sheep, 40 or 50 sheep and goats, and he's taking care of them. And he remembers that night, that evening when the lion came and it was prowling around and was going to take one of his sheep. and how with his sling and his sword, he killed that lion. How God helped him in that situation. And how another time, very similar, a bear came along. And that bear was going to attack a sheep, maybe even attack him, and God helped him, and he killed that bear. He remembers visiting his brothers when they were fighting against the Philistines. And he showed up at the war site, and he's asking, what's going on, and who's this Goliath on the other side, and why is nobody fighting him? And even though part of him was terrified, he remembers how God helped him, gave him courage to say, I'm going to go fight that Goliath. And he went, and God helped him, and he slung his stone, and God guided it, hit that Goliath in the head, knocked him down. He came over, took out Goliath's sword, and cut off his head. He said, I remember, God. I remember how you helped me in that time. He says, I remember when Saul was trying to kill me, and you brought that good friend Jonathan along, and he saved my life, how you helped me in that time. I remember how the city of Keilah was taken over by the Philistines, and I asked you, God, should I go help this city? And you said, yes, go. And I went and I saved that city. He has all these stories looking back on all the times that God had helped him. And because of that, he looks again to the future. And in the shadow of your wings, in the blue, I will sing for joy. Because of how you've helped me, I'm going to sing for joy. I don't know what you picture there in the shadow of your wings. This is not an eagle flying overhead and you see the shadow on you. This is a picture of a mother hen with her little chicks under her wing. We don't see this a lot because we don't raise our chicks together with their mothers, right? We take the eggs, we put them in an incubator, and they grow up on their own. But the way that God designed it is when a mother hen gives birth to these little eggs and they become chicks. I don't know if any of you have ever seen this, but you have a little mother hen walking around and all the little chicks following, and if there's any sort of danger, she puts her wings out like this, and you will watch 7 or 8 chicks disappear underneath that mother hen. If you've never seen it, just YouTube it when you go home this afternoon, because it's really cute. And all these little chicks go underneath her wings. That's what David is talking about. Like a mother hen who spreads out her wings to cover her little chicks and protect them, he's saying, that's where I am. That's where David situates himself. He's like one of those little chicks under the mother hen, and he's safe under the shadow of her wings. And he finishes on the present. In the red again, my soul clings to you, your right hand upholds me. So he starts on the present, he goes back and forth between here's what's happened in the past, and because of that I'm going to be faithful in the future, past, future, and back to the present. Here I am, God, I'm clinging to you. My life is in your hands, and you're holding me up. God is holding me up in this time. So this psalm is about what to do in difficult times, in times of transition. And there's a model here. We look back on our past, we remember his presence, remember those times being in God's presence, and we remember the times that he's helped us. And because we have that, it helps us be faithful in the future. It's easier said than done. It can be done, but this takes a conscious effort. This takes time to actually go through this process. For us as a family, we're obviously in a time of transition. We've been in ones before. Never on this scale, never so many moving parts to work together with. And we can identify with that first verse saying, God, we need you. If you don't show up in this, we are going to be in big trouble. God's been faithful to me. God's been faithful to Nikki. God's been faithful to our girls in the past. But my natural inclination is not to remember the past. And I don't think I'm really unusual in this. It's easier to spot in others. So if you know somebody in your life who maybe continually gets into bad relationships, they get together with someone who they shouldn't, and it goes really bad, and they get hurt, and months or years later, they get back in that cycle again. And you just want to say to them, stop doing this. Don't you see the pattern here? Every time you do this, it ends up the same way. Can't you see what's going on? It's really easy for us to see this, to say, you've been down this road so many times before. Why are you going down the same one again? Can't you see what's happening? Can't you see the pattern here? Or I've seen this with students. Students stress a different amount about the work that they have to do, and typically the smarter a student is, the more they stress about their work. And I had one student in particular who was one of the smartest students I've ever had, and she stressed more than any student I've ever had. And I would give out an assignment, and she would ask me all sorts of questions. How do I do this? How do I do that? And I gave them an opportunity. I said, if you want, you can do the assignment, hand it in a week early, and I'll give you some feedback. This was intended for the poorer students, so I could tell them how to do better, to turn their D paper into a C. But she would give it to me. I would hand it back and say, you don't have to change anything, it's excellent. And then she would hand it in the final time. And then between the time she handed it in till I graded it, she would be stressing, oh no, how am I going to do on that paper? How am I going to do? I'd give her back the paper, you got an A+, way to go. The first time around, that's fine. After 8 months of this, I sort of wanted to shake her and say, look, every time you go down this same road and the exact same thing happens. You stress about your paper, you work really hard, you get an A+. Why don't you just skip the stress and the worry part? It's really easy to see in other people. But in myself, I can see myself doing the same thing. I confess that I've worried in the last couple months about all these moving parts, all that has to be figured out. And I've been in that hard place and been so fixated on the present that I've forgotten at times about the past. And God will remind me, often through Nikki and other people, of the past. And he will say, Jeff, don't you see the pattern here? Don't you see what's happening in your life? Every time you've been in this situation, I've brought you through and given you something better. Don't you see what's going on? And so I need to be reminded of the past so that I can be faithful in the future and I can have peace in the present. I need to continually reflect on my stories. I've never killed a lion or a bear or a Goliath, but I do have my stories. When we were married for a year, and an opportunity came to be youth pastor in this church, we were not looking at that opportunity at all. In fact, I was raising money for Youth for Christ. I had what I thought was a dream position with Youth for Christ. And some of you know that process of raising support is hard. For me, it went incredibly fast. I had 80% in within a couple weeks. And so it seemed like God was confirming, yep, this is the right place to be. It was a sports ministry job. It was everything I ever wanted. And then this came up, and we said, well, but that doesn't make sense because I thought you were calling me to YFC, and Nikki has a job here, and she doesn't have a job there, and we could never afford a house out there, and all of these things. And God gave us a job. A little old lady from the community, she was 93 years old, selling her house, and we bought a little house for dirt cheap, and God gave us a house. And Nikki started working at Youth for Christ in Portage. And so all those people who I had asked to support me for my YFC job, a whole bunch of them just switched over and supported Nikki. And God worked it out beautifully. And when we left from there to go to Winkler, God called us in a very clear way saying, you need to be done your 4 years as a youth pastor. And we didn't have anything lined up. We had a 1-year-old baby. We didn't know where we were going to go or what we were going to do, but we went out in faith and said, okay, God, we'll follow you on this. And very quickly, he provided the job with Cross Current and gave us a place to live there. And Nikki had a wonderful place with other moms and kids around. And when the time came to leave there, it was hard again. I wanted to go to seminary. Nikki wanted to stay where she was. It was a hard thing for us to navigate. Like she said, she had a petting zoo and a beach and a playground and other moms and a place to go for lunch every day and all these things. And we looked at that move and said, we're going to need to find new community, new friends, a new church. How are we going to pay for school? If I'm going for school and Nikki's not working, I'm not working. How are we going to live? How are we going to pay for all this? And sure enough, God comes through again. He provided me with a job. My first 3 years, my salary was $10,000 a year, and God provided. We lived on that comfortably for 3 years. God provided everything that we needed, a new church, a new community for Nikki with young kids and other young moms, jobs, and turned into Mile 2. And so we look back and we have all these stories of just God continually providing for us time and time again. So I have to keep reminding myself of those stories in my present time, in my hard time, so that I can say, yeah, you know what, God, because of what you did, I will be faithful. And I can have peace and I can relax right now. And an honest assessment of myself is that if I didn't have these stories, I don't know where I would be at. But I do. I do have these stories. I do have a God who has been faithful to me for 40 years of my life. I do have all these times where I can look back on God's presence and say, yeah, God, I met you there. Yeah, you helped me there. You helped me there. You did that for me. And I have no reason to believe that you're going to be any different in the future. In fact, I'm banking on it. I'm putting all my chips in on the fact that you will be completely the same in the future as you have been in the past. And if God changes, I am in trouble because I am banking on him continuing to act like he has acted. So for us as individuals, if we're in a spot like David was, if we're in a hard spot, I would encourage us to take time, get a piece of paper and write down all the times God has helped you, all the times God has been faithful to you, all the times you've experienced his presence, all those mountaintop moments. Write them down and look at that list and say, yeah, because of that, I can continue to be faithful to you. And if you're not in a hard spot, do it anyways. Take half an hour this week and write down all the ways God has blessed you. And next time you get in a hard spot and your faith in God is shaken, because let's be honest, we all get our faith shaken at different times, pull that out and read through that. And by the time you're done, you're going to say, okay, yeah, I remember God. I remember you've been good to me. And for you as a church, in your time of transition, you've got 20 years of history where you can look back at a church and you can see the way God has provided for you as a church. You've got this building that you're in. You've got 2 faithful pastors who served you for 20 years. You've got story after story after story of mission trips and helping people where you can say, yeah, God, you've been faithful to us as a church, and we believe that you'll be faithful to us in the future. So I think there's something in this psalm for us. There's a model for us. And so I just want to encourage us this morning to take time to look back on the past, being in God's presence, and experience his faithfulness and his help. And let's just be confident that he will be faithful to us in the future, wherever he's going to lead us. Amen.